Hello again, it's me Mandala, and I'm back to share another open world build video for Guild Wars 2. And today I wanted to talk about the Mesmer class, and specifically the Virtuoso specialization, which I've picked from among the three Virtuoso elite specs to be the Mesmer open world build that I wanted to share. And so, really quickly, I wanted to talk about why I think Virtuoso is the best pick for an open world build in the current landscape of Guild Wars 2 balance, and explain why I picked it over some builds that people might consider better traditionally for open world play, like Mirage. And so this is a build that I think follows the fun a little better than the Mirage build does, and it's a little more practical. And I'll get into why that is a little bit later. But firstly, I just wanted to show you the build, demo it real quick on the Golem, and then after I demo it, we can talk about why I've picked this build and why I think it's the best way to play Mesmer in the open world. So really quickly, I'm going to spawn a Golem, and I'm going to do a quick demo damage pull on the Golem, and then we'll talk about it. So alright, so as you can see, pretty good damage, 15-6. Um, and so this is actually really high damage for these open world builds, again, that I've been sharing. This is another Celestial build, mostly, if we look at the hero panel in our gear and traits. So for this build, it's running mostly Celestial. There are two Rabid pieces, and I'll explain why we took these Rabid pieces. Is because we need to hit 60% crit chance to crit cap in this build, because critting is very important on even Condi Virtuoso. And so I've taken two Rabid pieces here to cap out our precision, to cap out our crit chance, so that we can get it to 100 once we have Fury, right? So if I click this and give myself Fury, right, we're at 100%. And so that's why I have these two Rabid pieces, but everything else is full Celestial stats in all the different slots. For runes, I'm taking the Superior Rune of the Thief, so this gives us, again, more precision so we can hit that crit cap and then condition damage on top of it. For the weapons, I'm running Dagger and Sword offhand, and then Staff. And for the sigils, I'm going Superior Sigil of Accuracy, and then Superior Sigil of Agony, and that's on both weapon sets. And then the relic, I'm taking Relic of the Aristocracy. This gives us 15% condition duration, because Virtuoso has free access to vulnerability. And so altogether, you have this really tanky build that's fun to play, full ranged, very tanky, has access to a ton of boons, as you saw in the poll. If you were looking at my boon bar, if you're looking at the bar down here and all the boons I had, it has permanent protection, permanent regen, uh, almost permanent might. The might can dip sometimes, so be aware of that. The might can dip, but I think it's okay that the might dips at some points, because it comes back really quickly and it exists in your opening bursts, in your big damage windows. You're always going to have it, so it's not that big that the might will dip out sometimes in the lulls in the rotation. um, but this is a really interesting build because it also has permanent quickness. And so to get into why I've set the build up this way, we can go into the traits that I've picked. And so the first trait line we're taking is the Chaos line, And this line has become really powerful with the last few balance patches. They've just continually updated and refurbished, I would say, some of the different traits in here. So it actually has so much power built into it, both defensively and offensively. And so the first minor trait is Metaphysical Rejuvenation. So we grant regeneration to allies when we use a healing skill. So this helps with our regen uptime. Uh, the next trait we have that we're going to take is Illusionary Defense. So this gives us protection when we use Shatter skills. Unfortunately, this skill is not catered towards Virtuoso's 5 blades, and so it caps out at the 3 proc, but it's still very valuable because it gives us permanent protection uptime because we can shatter so often on Virtuoso anyway because our blade uptime is pretty free. So it's still a great build, even though it's still a great trait choice, even though it doesn't function perfectly with Virtuoso. It's not completely optimal, but it's still, this line is just really broken, and you'll see why in just a second. So the next minor trait is Illusionary Membrane. So gain Chaos Aura when you use Shatter Skill 2. Shatter Skill 2 is this, Blade Song Sorrow. Um, when you have Chaos Aura, condition damage you deal is increased. So again, just we give ourselves Chaos Aura, which is a very valuable effect that we'll talk about more in just a second. And then when we have Chaos Aura, we deal increased damage. So the reason why Chaos Aura is very valuable is because of the next trait we're taking, which is Chaotic Transference. So when you grant Chaos Aura to yourself, grant it to nearby allies. When you apply Chaos Aura to ally, grant them boons, and the boon we grant is Regeneration. So again, this plays into our regen uptime and granting ourselves Chaos Aura, which is a valuable defensive and offensive tool um, that we'll talk about a little bit more later. And so the next minor is Chaotic Persistence. So gain concentration and expertise while affected by regeneration, and this is just such a huge stat boost to the build innately, just for having this regen uptime that we've guaranteed by taking this line anyway. And so we get plus 250 concentration and then plus 250 expertise. So concentration helps us with our boon duration, that's what that stat converts to, and expertise helps us with our condition duration. And so we have just a ton of extra bonus stats from taking this line. And then finally we have Bountiful Disillusionment, which is just really strong on the Virtuoso line, Virtuoso build. So it gives us stability when we shatter, and we shatter a lot because our blade uptime is super high, right? So every time we use a shatter skill, which is these F skills up here, any of these 5, we gain stability, and then we also gain other boons based on which shatter we use. So we gain Might for using the F1, we gain Vigor for using the F2, we gain Fury for using the F3, we gain 3 stacks of stability for using the F4, and then for using the F5, which I have bound to E here, the Blade Turn Requiem, we get resistance. So as you can see, we have a lot of powerful utility coming off of this line, plus a huge stat boost from taking it. And so this line gives us access to permanent regen, permanent protection, tons of damage, tons of concentration, tons of expertise, permanent stability basically, and then other valuable boons we can take. So the next trait line I'm taking is Illusions, and this is a very specific setup that I'm taking. Illusions wouldn't necessarily be considered the best line to take on a Virtuoso build, but I'm doing it very specifically because I've said in a lot of other build videos that I value quickness a lot on open world builds because I think it helps with the fluidity of combat and just making combat feel good. And so this build is very specifically designed to utilize Virtuoso and the Mesmer's ability to create phantasms and clones, and for these phantasms to give us the quickness boon. So the first minor in this trait is Cry of Pain. Shatter Skill 2 inflicts more stacks of confusion, which is good just because we're on a Condi build with Celestial stats. Persistent Memory, when a phantasm becomes a clone, it transfers its boons to you, right? So keep that in mind, that any phantasm with boons will get whatever boons they have left once the phantasm completes. The next minor, Compounding Power, creating an illusion increases your outgoing damage and condition damage for a short duration. So real quickly, I wanted to talk about like what is considered an illusion. So any clone is considered an illusion, any blade is considered an illusion, any phantasm is considered an illusion, and then if you're running like axe on Mirage, that would also be considered illusion. The ambush skill, those little axes are considered illusions, I'm pretty sure. The phantasmal axes. So we'll have a lot of stacks of this compounding power innately, just because Virtuoso stocks blades so quickly, because that's an illusion. And yeah, one sec. Okay, I'm back. All right, and so now the next trait is the big one. The reason why we're taking this illusions line, and so phantasmal haste. Phantasms spawn with quickness. Gain quickness when create a phantasm. All right, so this skill works. This trait synergizes with the persistence of memory. So we're going to be spawning phantasms with quickness, gaining quickness from spawning them, right? And then when the phantasm turns into a clone, after it does its phantasmal attack, it gives us the remaining quickness it has, and so you can see that when we spawn a ton of phantasms, this will give us access to permanent quickness, which I demoed before in the demo. And so next up, the next minor, Master of Misdirection. Shatter skills gain reduced recharge, which is good because shatters are very important on this build. And then finally we have Phantasmal Force, which again synergizes with the fact that we're playing a phantasm-based build. And so phantasms deal increased strike damage for each stack of might you have. And right, we talked about how we mostly have permanent might almost. And then gain might when your phantasms become clones. And this is how also we're generating our might is by creating phantasms. So you can see all the synergistic uh, qualities, traits of this build. And so real quick, lastly, we're going to go through the Virtuoso line. And then I'm going to explain a little bit in detail how the build works. So just one second. Okay, so with the Virtuoso line, Virtuoso changes our clones and our shatters. So instead of clones, we now have blades, which stock permanently, and you can see them floating over my character's head here, these 5 blades, and you can see them stacked here. It also changes our shatters to these blade songs, which are powerful, ranged offensive tools mostly, some defensive, but mostly offensive tools. So that's this first trait is the blades. So instead of clones, we have blades, and so we'll talk about why that's valuable in just a second. But the first trait we actually take in the first column is Jagged Mind. Blade attacks inflict bleeding on crits, right? And we're crit capped. So with the crit cap, we have access to a lot more bleeds, and then in addition to this, a percentage of our condition damage now heals us. So this is part of adding sustain to this build, right? We're an open world build. We want some sort of passive sustain. So we already have regen, and we already have protection for durability from this chaos line, but now we also have sustain from doing damage with this Jagged Mind trait. And so you start to see how the build functions a little bit and how it keeps itself up, even though we're not taking a ton of defensive. We're not taking the inspiration line, right? This inspiration line is mostly a trap. Like I've tried. It is a good line, but like every time I try to fit this inspiration line in, I feel like I'm just losing too much of the fun and the potency of these builds, and so I just couldn't find a way to make the inspiration line feel good enough to me. So that's why I'm not taking it here. But like if you wanted to try, I mean, you can try to make the inspiration line work, but and it will work on some builds. It's just I think your damage is going to be really low, and you're going to have like good survivability, but it's going to be at the cost of having fun. So that's the trade-off you're asking for there with the inspiration line. But back to the Virtuoso line. The next minor trait we have is Deadly Blades. So blades inflict vulnerability on crits, right? This is where a lot of that free vuln is coming from. And if you are watching the Golem Pull, you'll see that oftentimes we have 25 stacks of vuln because blades and the blade songs inflict vulnerability because these are considered blade attacks. So all 5 of these blades apply a stack of vuln, and so we basically have permanent vuln as long as we're being active. It'll dip sometimes, like the might, it'll dip, but luckily when you activate your powerful skills, you'll mostly have decent vuln uptime. So that's good. And one sec. And then next up is Sharpening Sorrow. So gain Fury when you activate a Blade Song Sorrow, right, which is this second one, number 2. And then Fury increases your expertise, right? So essentially, when we have regen and Fury, we'll be expertise capped plus the vuln uptime. So right now we're only at 60% bleed because bleed is our main um, condition that we're trying to generate. on this build, but if I give myself Fury, right, this jumps up to 70% bleed, and then if I give myself Regeneration, it jumps up to 87, and then we get 15 from the Relic of Aristocracy, so that gets us at bleed cap. So we'll be at bleed cap on this build, which is good. So we'll be at bleed cap, crit cap, and we're full Selly, so we can take advantage of all the things that offers us offensively while still being very tanky and survivable. So next up in the minor for the Virtuoso line is Quiet Intensity. Fury gives us increased crit chance, gain ferocity based on your vitality, right? So this plays into Celestial Gear again. We get a bunch of ferocity from having vitality. And our Fury gets increased crit chance, so right, instead of 25, it's now 40%. And then lastly, we're taking Blood Song, so Bleeding You Apply deals increased damage, which is great because this is a bleed focused build. And then Stock a Blade after applying enough stacks of bleed. And this is the key skill for why we get access to so many blades, is because we're applying all these stacks of bleeds, it kind of compounds on itself. It's like exponential. It's multiplicative, and so right, basically just the fact that we're using shatters to create bleeds gives us more blades to do it more often. And so you just saw while I was doing the demo on the Golem how you can just spam all these blade songs pretty quickly. And then but yeah, so that's the gear, that's the traits. I do actually recommend you take the highest Jadebot core you can because of that trait that gives you that turns vitality into ferocity. So this is a damage increase to have this tier 10 Jadebot core here, but you don't necessarily need it. Like Jadebot cores are expensive, so don't like stress out about it. But yeah, so this is open world condition Virtuoso, and I'm gonna go into how it works a little bit, and then explain why it's better, in my opinion, than the Mirage open world build, which has a lot of strengths and that a lot of people recommend, but I wanted to explain why I'm not recommending a Mirage variant of Mesmer to play in open world and why I'm recommending specifically this Virtuoso build. So just 1 second, and then I'll go into how the build works and why I've set it up this way. Okay, so the way the build works is we're using our weapon skills that have this Phantasm mechanic, right? And so on the staff, it's this Phantasmal Warlock, and on the dagger sword setup, it's the Phantasmal Swordsman, and then in our utilities, it's Phantasmal Disenchanter. So we're using these 3 Phantasm skills plus our heal skill, which is Signet of the Ether. So when we activate the heal skill, we refresh all our Phantasm cooldowns. So the way this works is, so if I spawn this Golem, right? So what I'm doing is on Sword, I'm just doing a quick opener where I summon the Phantasm, use a Blade Song, use maybe 2 and 3, and then I weapon swap so that I can get to the staff weapon Phantasms. And so then on staff, I use the 3, and then I use the Phantasmal Disenchanter, and then I might activate another Blade Song, and then I use the heal skill, and you see these skills regen, right? And so I can use the 3, and I can use the Phantasmal Disenchanter again, and this is giving me quickness, and every time a Phantasm does its thing, it turns into a clone. And so what's cool about the staff is that Phantasmal Warlock spawns 2 Phantasms. So right, so when I do this, you can see the 2 Phantasms here, right? And so when they die, when they're done, they turn into blades, right? And so I went from 1 blades to 3 blades. And so what effectively you're allowed to do is you take these blades. So you take these Phantasm skills. So you do these 3 Phantasms here, and then you do these 3 Phantasms again. And as you can see, this generates a ton of quickness for us. And so we have access to permanent quickness, really good might up time, again, because of this Phantasmal Force trait. And this allows us to do all these Blade Songs. So as far as the other weapon skills, the 2 is just creates a blade, right? So the 2 creates a blade is damage. 3 is a blade attack that also does damage. Phantasmal Warlock we talked about. It gives us might also, but we basically just use this on cooldown, off cooldown. So we use it at the beginning of the sword rotation, and then at the end of the sword rotation, and then we swap to staff and just use staff skills until you can get your sword rotation back, until you get the weapon swap back. And on staff, we just want to use Chaos Storm, Chaos Armor, and then Phantasm and Phase Retreat off cooldown basically. This generates a clone, and so when you generate a clone on Virtuoso, it just generates a blade. And so you just want to make sure that you're using all your blade skills off cooldown once you have 5 blades in them, just to be as optimal as possible, because eventually you will run out of cooldowns for your blade songs for these F1 skills. So you basically just don't want to use them unless you're full capped, even though some of them synergize better with not using a full cap. You just want to fully cap it. On sword, your other skill, this illusionary riposte, this is a block, so it'll block 1 attack, and it has a half-second evade frame, but you just block 1 attack with it, and then if you don't want to block, you can use it for CC. And then, like I talked about here, this Chaos Armor and the Chaos Storm are just for bonus boons. And this is just how we're getting our regen uptime, is with the Chaos Armor, and then this is a combo finisher leap, so if we use that in the ethereal field, we also get more Chaos Armor. And then lastly, for the utilities, I'm taking Arcane Thievery, so this is a Condi Cleanse plus Boon Rip plus more quickness uptime, so that's why I'm taking that here. And then I'm taking Psychic Force because it's just upfront might and a stun break and CC, so it's just also just really useful. And then your elite skill is actually flexible. I'm just taking Signet of Humility because I think having this like massive CC skill is really valuable, and having reduced duration, incoming stuns, daze, fears, and taunts is really useful. But you could get away with taking 1,000 cuts, or if you're doing more like exploratory stuff, you could take Mass Invisibility if you needed to like just piece out of a fight for a little bit, right? So you get stealthier, and you can just, now that you have stealth, you can just run away. But yeah, this slot's pretty flexible. This slot also, the Psychic Force skill is also flexible, but I think Arcane Thievery is kind of a must to make sure quickness uptime feels good and that you don't dip out of quickness uptime. Lastly, I'm taking the birthday cake food, again, because I don't recommend taking non-infinite consumables into open world. I think it's a waste of your money, but this food helps us cap out on precision and other stuff, so it's really valuable. If you don't have these things, it's not the end of the world, right? The build will still function without it, but yeah, so this is the build, and next up I wanted to explain why I'm not recommending the Mirage build, because a lot of people will tell you Mirage is better, and it's not true, and I wanted to explain why that's not true and why I don't recommend it for general open world play. So I'm going to switch to my Mirage and explain that real quick, and then I might do an open world demo on this build, and then we'll be done. So really quick, I'm going to switch to Mirage and explain why I do not recommend Mirage for general open world play. Okay, and so the reason why I don't recommend Mirage is because of, very specifically, of how the Mesmer clone mechanic works. And so Mirage was a build I really enjoyed for a really long time, and this is actually the open world build that I set up for Mirage like ages ago. It doesn't have runes on it right now, but this build, it seems so good on paper. Like, it's so survivable. You have the ability to dodge infinite, basically. You have permanent quickness uptime and alacrity uptime, and basically all boons permanent uptime, and you do decent damage, and it has a bunch of utility and movement skills and stuff, and it looks amazing on paper and in the Golem. But I wanted to explain why it doesn't work. It's not very practical in open world, and that's because of this clone mechanic. So on Mesmer, Mirage uses the traditional Mesmer clones, and so when we're using these Phantasm builds, right, and we summon a clone, clones are target specific. So if you're in open world and your target dies, your clones disappear. So right, if I use this Phantasmal Warlock, on this spark, it generates the phantasms and they do their attack, right? And when they die, they're supposed to make clones, but because my target died, they don't make clones. And so this is really, really frustrating in open world play, in general play, because all these builds, the coolest Mesmer builds rely heavily on clones, and they feel so good when you have like a really healthy single target that you need to take down, like a champion boss or something. But when you're doing general open world play, this feels horrible, right? Because every time, because we don't get full value out of our clones and our phantasms, because if our target dies, if we're like killing multiple targets, this feels really terrible. And so by the time we get like our setup done, our target might be dead, and then our clones will disappear, right? Even if we had fresh clones that we needed to use to do our Mesmer ambush to get this alacrity uptime. And so this doesn't work on... Mirage is just not as good as it seems on paper in actual practical open world situations. And but alternatively, right, if we're back on the Virtuoso build, Virtuoso, because it generates blades instead of clones, the blades persist even if our target dies. And so really quickly, I'm going to show you the same thing, the same skill, the Phantasmal Warlock, on a target that dies. And you'll see that when the target dies, you still get your blades, which is why this build functions a lot better in open world to me than Mirage. And I also think Mirage is just a really high like learning curve. Like you have to understand how the ambush mechanic works and how your dodge works and all that. And it's really strong once you figure it out, but it's really frustrating, I think, for general open world play, and it's why I can't recommend it to people, even though I admit that on single target in the hands of a very strong and knowledgeable player, Mirage could be better. So real quick, let's see. I'm just gonna use these blades, and then I'm gonna spawn my phantasms, right? And so the target dies, and the phantasms are here, but because they got their attack off, we still get their blades, right? And so this is why I think Virtuoso is better for open world. I also think this Virtuoso build, I think Virtuoso is just really fun, and the dagger is really fun and has really good animations and feel to it, and really high range. Again, this build's full range, and so you're gonna feel really good using it, as opposed to the Mirage, where you're just gonna feel like just blocks. Like you're gonna feel like I don't want to say what I was gonna say about it, but it's gonna feel there's a not so kosher term that I was gonna use, but yeah, you're gonna feel underwhelmed when you play Mirage in open world and general play, because as you kill multiple targets, you're just gonna feel like your build just keeps falling out of the rhythm that it's supposed to be doing. But you're not going to find this on Virtuoso. Virtuoso is going to stay potent and keep its rhythm even when you're not fighting just a single target like big health sponge. And so the last thing I want to do is just demo, like, yes, this can do harder open world content, like your hero point challenges. So I'm going to do the hero point just outside of New Kainang, and then I might do the one, the Heart of Thorns Chalk one I always do, just to be like, hey, look, it does work on open world. But you saw the damage is good, it has access to regen, natural passive healing, protection uptime, has decent resolution uptime, which is a rare one for most open world builds, just because resolution is kind of a new boon, like relative to the game's long-term history. Resolution hasn't done what it's done for a long time, and so they kind of phased it out a lot and are just now kind of rephasing it in. Also, the way Condi Clan works is resolution can sometimes not be the most important, but I digress. And so real quick, I'm just going to demo this on this boss up here, which is one I like to test things on, and then I'm going to do a Heart of Thorns one. So you can see this guy's really not doing anything to us, and we're generating all these boons, like this massive boon bar that we have right here. And so this is why this build's pretty cool, is it ramps up pretty quickly, it's fun, it's ranged, you have all this stability so you don't feel like you're just getting knocked down and then destroyed every time and you can't react to things. And then lastly, just a little bit about the utility of these skills. So Blade Song Distortion, which is this F4, is a valuable, you're immune to conditions and damage, so this is a valuable defensive tool. And so you can use it in combat to basically prevent all damage for a short duration based on how many blades you use. And then Blade Song Dissonance is CC, so depending on the blade count, you do days. And so this is a valuable CC skill. I'm just talking right now, so I'm not playing optimally. But yeah, so this build, it does require you to do the Phantasms, to actively use your Phantasm skills and use this heal skill to regenerate your Phantasms on staff so that you can keep the quickness uptime. But it's not as hard as it might seem, and it's really fun. It's versatile, it's tanky, and yeah. So lastly, we'll do the Heart of Thorns one. Again, this build, I'm interested in like generalist builds for general open world play and not necessarily solo. So like Mesmer's a hard one because I wouldn't necessarily recommend a Virtuoso build for like the most difficult solo content in the game. Like if you were gonna like solo a legendary bounty, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Virtuoso to you even on this build, because the survivability is very dependent on your ability to react to things, and the passive sustain isn't enough to out sustain like the most damaging encounters. So you'll see here we might struggle with this a little bit. I actually don't think we'll struggle that hard because I will have permanent protection and we will CC it up front with this huge. So look, I'll do all of its CC bar with this skill. Isn't that cool? But as you can see, we do take damage, and we do need to like kind of block things a little bit. But this can be a valuable tool, and you see I'm using the dissonance there. But we do need to like dodge on an encounter like this and stuff. So again, I don't recommend it against like super high damage single target threats. But as you can see, we are doing fine, and we eventually do sustain back up, and if we're willing to dodge, it works fine anyway. But yeah, so yeah, it can do the hard stuff. That was the thing that was preventing me from recommending the inspiration builds, is that I would come to this hero challenge and just get deleted, and so I was like, I don't know if I really like this. But with the rework to this chaos trait line, right? And the fact that illusionary defense now gives us protection uptime, permanent protection, I think this build's really strong. It's tanky enough now that I would recommend it for general open world play. Really fun build. Mesmer's been a tricky one. Mesmer, Elementalist, and Thief are all builds that like are super cool. Like they're the coolest builds from a fun. They're the coolest classes from a fun perspective, but they're really hard to find a build that's fun and strong at the same time. And so this is the build I recommend. Again, I looked through all of the Mesmer builds I could find online from other people, and I just didn't quite like them that much. And so this is the build I would recommend. I think this is the most fun way to play Mesmer in open world. And as you can see, it's really strong, really survivable, and really fun, really interesting way to play Mesmer. It'll help you learn how phantasms and illusions work, and how to just play Mesmer in general. I think it's a good starter build for that. It won't help you with like learning the more nuanced things about clones and like Mirage ambushes, which can really help you learn the game, but that's fine, because that's just like, you don't necessarily need to know how to do that. Mirage is just like a weird class, weird specific gameplay mechanic. You can learn how to play Mirage kind of by playing like Untamed or something. But yeah. Anyway, really strong build. Again, you saw the boons. You saw high damage, very tanky, very fun. You have reactive utility. You have flex utility. You have quickness uptime, which makes the build more fun. You're full ranged, and yeah. So this is open world Virtuoso. So enjoy. Recommend this build. This is a fun build. Again, I recommend these because I think they're fun. So this is a fun build to play in open world for Mesmer. So enjoy, and I'll see you later. Bye.